Loki episode 4 is a shock to the system as the series throws a few twists and turns at us after a slower paced episode 3. There is a lot of details, Easter eggs, and potentially clues littered throughout the episode, so let's get going as I break down Loki episode 4, the Nexus Event. The episode begins as we see Sylvie playing on her version of Asgard. She seems happy and she's playing with the Valkyrie figure. At this point in the timeline, the Valkyrie should have been decimated by Hela, but it's good to see her having admiration for strong female heroes. We see Thor having an admiration for the strong Valkyrie warriors in Thor Ragnarok, and maybe in this moment Sylvie decides to be a hero like the Valkyries, which causes her Nexus Event. You can also see a toy version of the Fenris wolf which Hela controls in Ragnarok, and a Viking ship which is similar to Asgardian architecture and where Norse mythology comes from in real life. Ravonna Renslayer appears through a time door, and at this point in her career she is a hunter, with the number 823. This of course is a nod to Avengers number 23, which is her first appearance in the comics, and a story that features Kang the Conqueror as the antagonist. When Sylvie is being processed, the perspective really helps to establish the more sinister TVA, and why exactly Sylvie hates them so much. Renslayer brings Sylvie in front of a different judge, but Sylvie is able to make her escape with Renslayer's temp pad, and so begins Sylvie's life on the run. This may also explain why Ravonna Renslayer is so desperate to catch Sylvie, because she was the one that let her get away in the first place. This transitions to Ravonna on the golden elevator on her way to see the Timekeepers, and as the door opens we get our first small glimpse at these beings, shrouded in smoke with their eyes glowing. But we'll talk more about them later. Mobius is waiting at the elevator and asks Renslayer if he can have access to Hunter C-20. Renslayer refuses and tells Mobius that she has died, that the variant enchanted her mind and scrambled her brains. Mobius is a little skeptical because the last time he saw C-20, she was alive. Back on Lamentus 1, we are with the Lokis, and we get the shot from the trailer that everyone was dissecting. We now see it was altered and that there are giant spotlights added to explain the source of light on the characters. Sylvie says she remembers her Asgard. She says the universe wants to break free, so it creates chaos. This explains why there are so many Loki variants that the TVA deal with. Loki is an agent of chaos and mischief. Sylvie elaborates on the flashback we saw and explains that after she escaped, she ran, but everywhere she went created a Nexus Event, because she was never meant to exist, until she learned where to hide, and so she grew up at the end of 1,000 worlds. We see that Mobius is conducting an extensive search of the sacred timeline looking for the Nexus Events to find the Lokis. He has magnified the Nexus threshold to help the search. It is here that we see that the timeline has been corrected since Sylvie's attack at the end of episode 2, and that her attack was merely meant as a diversion to scramble the TVA so she could access the Timekeepers. Hunter B-15 walks in and asks about C-20, and it is clear she was affected by her time under Sylvie's enchantment. Sylvie asks Loki if...
I think that what makes a Loki is the fact that we're destined to lose.
To which Loki responds that they may lose, sometimes painfully, but they don't die, which is also a nice bit of foreshadowing for later on in the episode. Loki reminds Sylvie of all that she accomplished, and just as the planet begins to go, Sylvie grabs onto Loki and they exchange a glance. This moment causes a huge erratic branch on the timeline, which alerts Mobius to their location, but what exactly does cause this branch? Is it the power of love, or is it something else? Loki and Sylvie are taken prisoner, and one of the Minutemen restraining Sylvie has a device over her eye, which is an homage to the appearance of the TVA Justices in the comics, most notably the appearance of Justice Peace, who famously wears this type of device. Mobius takes Loki into a time theater, and you can see that they do both have respect for each other, and that Mobius does feel betrayed by Loki's betrayal. He opens a red time door and has Loki put inside, but before Loki goes, he tells Mobius that the TVA is lying to him. Now, the red doors are the entrance to the time cells, which are time loops, and this is something that is taken directly from the comic books. Loki's time loop is of a time that he cut off Lady Sif's hair, and we get the surprising return of Jamie Alexander as Lady Sif. This is smart because this is Marvel's way of reminding us of the character, because we know she's going to appear in Thor Love and Thunder. Loki cutting Sif's hair is an event taken straight from the Old Norse mythology, and this show especially uses a nice amount of stuff from the Old Norse lore. Mobius goes to check on Sylvie, who is in Time Theater 47. If you look, you can see that Sylvie has been a little hard to handle, and she is roughing up the Minutemen. Hunter B-15 is on guard there, as well, and Mobius mentions bringing in Kree, the aliens from Captain Marvel, Titans, which may be referring to the race of people from the planet Titan, the home of Thanos, even though Thanos is technically an Eternal, albeit with a deviant gene, so not a pure Eternal. In the comics, his brother Eros, aka Star Fox, was also an Eternal from Titan. He also mentions bringing in vampires, which is actually the second time we hear confirmation of vampires in the MCU, the first being Korg in Thor Ragnarok. This, of course, is more important to note because we know we have a new Blade movie coming now. B-15 asks Mobius if Loki said anything, and Mobius tells her he said that the TVA is lying to them, and you can see the unease on her face. We later see her staring at a propaganda poster which reads, "Did you get them all? Verify through deletion." This phrase visibly affecting B-15, further adding to her uneasiness. In the time prison, Loki attempts to stop the Sith memory by telling her why exactly he cut her hair. He says he thought it was funny, and it's not. He's a narcissist, and he's scared of being alone. This is actually a really great moment for the character, who felt like he grew up in the shadow of his brother Thor and never really belonged. Mobius comes in and attempts to see if Loki is ready to talk, and he uses the phrase, "I ought to box your ears," which I found funny because I never heard this before, and apparently it is an old disciplinary phrase used by parents that means to slap both ears at the same time. I don't know if this was meant to show Mobius' true age or what, but I found it weird and pretty funny. Loki begins to tell Mobius this lie about him and Sylvie working together and him being the mastermind to avoid going back into the time cells. However, when Mobius lies and tells him that Sylvie was pruned, Loki can't help but react, and it is here Mobius figures out that Loki loves Sylvie, and their love is what potentially caused that strange branch in the timeline. He, of course, reacts accordingly in the sense that none of this is normal, but it is perfect for Loki to essentially fall in love with himself. Loki tells Mobius that everyone who works at the TVA are variants, and Mobius, to his credit, is not dumb and is starting to piece everything together, but he is smart enough to not show Loki he's starting to believe him. Mobius is in Renslayer's office, closing the Loki case. She signs the papers with the same pen she used last episode that Mobius questioned, and if you pay attention, you can see him look down at the pen again after he signs the paper, hinting at his growing suspicion. When Renslayer goes to add Sylvie's sword to her collection, Mobius switches their temp pads. He then leaves after pretending to not remember how many drinks he had. B-15 takes Sylvie to the rocks cart from episode 2 and questions what she did to her. Sylvie tells her that she showed her memories from her life before the TVA, and explains that she cannot create memories, only work with what is there, and B-15 asks her to show her again. And I want to shout out Wunmi Masaku, who plays Hunter B-15, because she is fantastic in this episode, in this scene especially. We do not see what memories she sees, but we see what they mean to her from her expressions alone. Mobius shows up in Loki's time cell and asks if the connection he shares with Sylvie is real, because he theorizes that together they are strong enough to tear down the entire TVA.
So I just have to trust the word of two Lokis? How about the word of a friend?
Mobius admits to Loki that he was right from the beginning about the TVA, and the two friends are reunited in a common goal. His connection with Mobius is great, and it feels genuine, and it is nice to see Loki finally have an actual friend. Waiting for them outside of the time cell is Renslayer with a squad of Minutemen. She knows Mobius switched their time pads. Mobius embraces his fate and stands in defiance of the TVA and Renslayer as she has him reset in quite possibly one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the MCU. I mean, the guy just wanted a jet ski, but maybe there's still a chance for him. Renslayer has Loki brought to the elevators to be reset in front of the Timekeepers, and when she goes to get Sylvie, she notices she is soaked, and learns that B-15 was the last to be let in to see her. So she says that B-15 has also been compromised and starts a search for her. At the elevator, Sylvie asks Loki if he is okay, and Renslayer says she will take it from here and escorts them both into the elevator. On the way up, Sylvie asks Renslayer if she remembers her, and she says yes, and then she asks what her Nexus event was, and Renslayer gives the old villain response by saying she doesn't remember, while having a big smirk on her face. The elevators open and we get a better look at the Timekeepers and their lair. Behind them is this glowing red symbol that looks extremely similar to Asgardian runes. We have seen runes used before, most recently in WandaVision, where Agatha and Wanda use them to stop magic users from using their magic. It's also possible that something like this stops magic from working in the TVA. The area is also full of Penrose stairs, which is an architectural design that represents a continuous loop, or stairs that you can continuously climb without getting any higher. We also see a higher rank of Minutemen, which most likely are probably guards to the Timekeepers. As we get to the Timekeepers, we get to see that one is sitting above the others and has a more humanoid appearance than the other two. With the other two sitting below him, they look extremely fake, and the voices are all pretty distorted digitally, which may be a clue to the big reveal we get in a little bit. The Timekeepers ask Loki and Sylvie if they have any last words before their death, and Loki says that he has lost track of the number of times he has been killed, so go ahead, which is pretty accurate and also foreshadowing what happens next. B-15 arrives and unlocks Loki and Sylvie's collars and throws Sylvie's sword at her, and a fight breaks loose. B-15 is knocked out, and Sylvie gives Loki her sword because she is clearly the superior fighter and is able to take down her 2 guards fairly quickly and knocks out Renslayer, as Loki finishes off his 2. The middle timekeeper tells Sylvie she is also a child of the timekeepers and that they can talk, which is quite curious, but she throws her sword instead, decapitating the middle timekeeper and revealing that they were androids being controlled. As Loki begins to tell Sylvie how he feels, he is pruned by Renslayer from behind in the second gut punch of the episode. And really, this just shows me that Renslayer...
She is the worst! She is the worst person in the world.
Sylvie disarms Ravonna and tells her that she wants to know everything. In the post-credit scene, Loki asks if he is dead and in hell, with one L, as in the hell from Norse mythology. And someone responds, not yet, but you will be. Loki looks up and we see 4 Loki variants standing over him, in a shot very reminiscent of the shot from the Avengers. Richard E. Grant is revealed and he is in a full classic Loki comic costume. He is credited as playing classic Loki, so I'm assuming this is the Loki from the comics. Then you have Kid Loki, who is also in a near-perfect recreation of his comic costume, holding a character who I lovingly refer to as Croaky, even though it's an alligator. Finally, there is a character who is listed as Boastful Loki, who is holding what appears to be a cheaply made version of Mjolnir, and whose suit is pretty much almost identical to King Loki's suit from the comics. I mean, from the fur, the boots, the metal rings around the belt, they're almost near identical recreations of the suit. The appearance of Croaky is actually interesting because that means the potential for Throg. Yes, back on the Throg train, baby. Give me that Throg. Throg all day. We're getting Throg. 100%. You heard it here first. Throg is coming. I know it. I feel it in my gut. So there is a lot to unpack this episode, and there are a few directions the show may take from here. One thing I want to discuss is the strange and unique Nexus event that caused that crazy branch at the beginning of the episode. Now, the show makes it seem like it was caused by Loki and Sylvie having this moment of love and connection, but at the same time, they were both about to die. And what if it was the death of one of, if not both of them, that caused the branch, and because they both still have a part to play in the grand scheme of things, on the sacred timeline, they cannot yet be killed. Because if you think about it, even if they found this connection in each other, they still would have died. They were literally seconds away from death. Which leads me to my next point. We learn in this episode that the timekeepers are androids, but who is the person behind the curtain? One logical theory would point to it being Kang the Conqueror, either as Nathaniel Richards or in any of his forms. I mean, he makes a lot of sense. He is a time-traveling villain with heavy ties to the TVA and the timekeepers in the comics, and he has been cast. We know that Jonathan Majors is playing Kang in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, so perhaps this will help set up the character in that movie. Another clue is the use of Ravonna Renslayer, who in the comics is a major love interest of Kang, and in this series so far, she's being portrayed as the person closest to the real head of the TVA, so the connection is there. However, the show is called Loki, and it would be fitting if the person behind the scenes was a Loki. We assumed Richard E. Grant could be pulling the strings as a version of King Loki, but what if it could be a Lady Loki that is running the show, and she has been protecting a sacred timeline in order to produce Sylvie to ensure her existence? It would be an interesting play on the King Loki story from Agents of Asgard, where Sylvie and Loki can start fresh and choose to live from here on out how they choose to. Another potential possibility is that the person who is the big bad will be revealed to be a version of He Who Remains, who is the last agent of the TVA who created the Timekeepers in the comic books. One thing I am thinking is that the sacred timeline is not the only timeline. It is the one being protected by whoever is pulling the strings, and it's only sacred to them, with the multiverse existing this entire time. Now, the biggest question, where exactly is Loki? We see him wake up in a rundown version of New York, as we can see the Avengers Tower in the background. Now, from trailer footage, we also see the USS Elridge from the real-life Philadelphia experiment drop in this area. The Philadelphia experiment claiming to turn the ship invisible for a brief period of time. So is this a variant version of that ship that actually did manage to turn invisible? We also see in another piece of trailer footage that Mobius appears to be here as well, driving past a Sphinx, so it stands to reason that this is not a place only for Loki, and it is some sort of pocket reality or dimension where things that are pruned are sent. It is very reminiscent of Battleworld from the Secret Wars comics, or even Chronopolis, the bubble city made by King the Conqueror that is full of things taken from throughout time, including sphinxes and pyramids. What did you guys think about episode 4 of Loki? Were you guys just as shocked as everyone else? Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen next. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the notification bell to make sure you are ready for all the new videos we have coming your way. And until next time, I will catch you later.